Hungary, a prosperous kingdom. There are a small group of countries in the European Union known as the V4 Group, which aims to represent the particular interests of Central Europe. The number 4 stands for 4 countries: Czechia, Poland, Hungary and Slovakia, and the letter V stands for Visegrad, a town on the Danube bend where the group was established in 1991. The citadel above the town was the site of a congress 650 years earlier in 1335, where King Charles I of Hungary hosted the Czech and Polish kings John of Bohemia and Casimir the Great to forge an alliance. The dukes of Saxony and Bavaria were also present. Slovakia at the time did not yet exist, as the territory of the modern state was then a part of the Kingdom of Hungary. The Royal Congress of Visegrad, 1335. An illustrious affair, the Congress was marked by the pomp and ceremony of lavish feasts and tournaments, and resulted in significant diplomatic achievements. Both the Polish king and the Teutonic knights accepted the Hungarian king's role as arbiter, and he was successfully able to mediate between the Polish and Czech monarchs, thus settling their differences. Additionally, all 3 kings reached a consensus on new international trade routes. The Visegrad Congress was indicative of Hungary's significant international influence and status under Charles I, who, at the height of his power and wealth, likely thought back to his own arrival in Hungary some 35 years earlier as a child. Then, the country he encountered was plagued by internal strife, the despotism of provincial lords, violence, and noblemen throughout the land wishing for his demise. What strategy did Charles I employ to overcome anarchy, unite the state, and create a prosperous economy? How did the Kingdom of Hungary become one of the most dominant powers of 14th to 15th century Europe? During the reign of Louis the Great, were Hungary's borders ever washed by 3 seas, as the nostalgic saying would have us believe? Charles I. Following the death of Andrew III in 1301, Arpad's lineage was passed down the female line. Thus, foreign queens and mothers, originally princesses of the House of Arpad, would create a legal foundation for Czech and German claimants to the throne. The King of Naples, Charles of Anjou, also called Charles the Lame, wedded Mary, Stephen V's daughter, an Arpadian princess. The marriage provided a legal basis for his successors to assert their rights to the Hungarian throne. Originally from France, Charles the Lame was the Count of the province of Anjou and the grandson of the King of France. In 1300, to avert a possible throne dispute, he put his 12-year-old grandson Caroberto, known in Hungary as Charles, on a ship with some money with the aim of sending him far from Naples and having him eventually ascend to the Hungarian throne. Initially, the venture seemed unpromising, since Andrew III was still alive at the time, and even after he died in 1301, most Hungarian lords preferred to support the Czech claimant to the throne. During the late 13th and early 14th centuries, the nobility, known as barons, owned extensive stretches of land spanning multiple counties, and including numerous castles and sizable military forces. The Kőszegi family held power in the Trans-Danubian region, László Kán in Transylvania, Kopász Borsa in the lowlands, Amadé Aba in the eastern part of Upper Hungary, and Máté Csák in the territory north of the Danube. Máté Csák alone owned over 40 castles. The provincial lords did not wish to divide the kingdom, and sought instead to appoint a weak ruler who would not interfere with their power dynamics. Initially, Charles was supported by only the Pope and a few barons, but he bade his time and waited for his opponents to falter. Crowned 3 times, it was only his 3rd coronation in 1310 with the Holy Crown at Székesfehérvár that was considered legitimate. In the early years of his reign, he retreated to Temesvár to distance himself from potentially dangerous opponents. Over time, his power base expanded, and in 1312 he defeated the Oba brothers at Rozgony. He then waited for the deaths of László Kán and Máté Csák so as to lay claim to their estates. Commandeering the land and properties, such as castles of deceased or defeated lords, established a new class of loyal nobility. Thus, he was able to stabilize his power. High-ranking officials in Hungary. The most eminent dignitary in the country, below the king, was the Palatine. The post was established by King Stephen and, until 1848, held varying degrees of authority. The Palatine was the most prominent royal council member, exercising national judicial power and acting as the monarch's substitute. Next was the Archbishop of Esztergom, who had the power to perform coronations and, in his capacity as Prince Primate, served as the head of the Hungarian Catholic Church. The third highest rank, a secular one, was Lord Chief Justice, followed by the Master of the Treasury, who was responsible for town and economic affairs. Barons also held important positions such as Master of the Horse, Master of the Doorkeepers, and Lord Steward of the Household. The Transylvanian voivode and the bands who governed the southern territories were also significant dignitaries. Hungary's gold. Upon consolidating his power, Charles I introduced economic reforms that were made possible by Hungary's significant non-ferrous metal deposits. Charles also encouraged mining, and soon production was outstanding even by global standards. The annual output of 1 to 2 tons of gold in the 14th and 15th centuries constituted some 80% of Europe's entire output, and 10 tons of silver accounted for 1/4 of it. Rumors were circulating in medieval Europe that even the grapevines in Hungary were laced with gold, from which jewelry could be made. Mining generated substantial revenues for the state treasury, providing the basis for monetary reform. The Hungarian gold forint, modeled after Florentine coins, became a preferred currency throughout Europe due to its 23.5 carat value and weight of 3.55 grams. Körmöcbánya, founded by Charles I, was Hungary's most important site for gold production and minting. The mint in Körmöcbánya produced variable coins for the kingdom until 1918, and to this day, Slovakia's euro coins are made there. Supplementary sources of wealth for king and country came from such quarters as the salt mines in Transylvania and Maramuros, urbanization, a thriving guild industry, and an increase in trade. The king granted privileges to several towns, and in addition to the mining towns in Upper Hungary, cities such as Pozsony, Sopron, Győr, Pécs, Buda, Brassó, Szeben, Kolozsvár, and Kassa also emerged as important urban centers during this time. National tax that serfs were required to pay also contributed to the budget. The overall quality of life for peasants improved as they replaced the dugouts of the early Árpád era with houses made of mud and wood, and added meat to their diet. Louis the Great. Hungary was a prosperous country by the time the eldest son of Charles I inherited it, and he focused his efforts on enhancing Hungary's and the Angevin dynasty's power and influence within Europe. His success is reflected in his title of Great, the only Hungarian king to have ever been named such. During his 40-year reign, he led 16 campaigns inspired by legendary conquerors such as Alexander the Great and Hungarian King Ladislaus. He fought valiantly in battles, sustaining several injuries, including once at the siege of Canossa in Italy, where he was struck by a stone whilst attempting to scale the fortress walls. Despite being advised to exercise caution, he insisted on setting a good example and continued the attack. He even risked his own life by jumping into a river to save one of his soldiers who was drowning. With thousands of heavy cavalry and artillery at his disposal, Louis was the first Hungarian monarch to incorporate cannons into the military. He achieved considerable military success in the Balkans, Lithuania, and Italy, ultimately becoming King of Poland in 1370. Despite his many achievements, the borders of Louis's kingdom never reached the shores of any sea. Poland, for instance, was blocked from the sea by the Teutonic Knights, and although Wallachia and Moldavia's Black Sea territories were under Louis's vassalage, they were not part of Hungary. However, he did reconquer the coastal region of Dalmatia from the Venetians, turning his kingdom into a maritime power for a while. After his brother Duke Andrew's assassination, Louis launched an Italian offensive, capturing Naples and achieving some military success. Ultimately, however, he failed to consolidate his power over Italy. Louis is recognized not only for his military achievements, but also for the 1351 decrees, the impact of which was felt for nearly 500 years. The most notable among them was a law of entail, safeguarding the estates of the Hungarian nobility and securing their economic stability for many generations to follow. Additionally, Louis ordered a fixed rate that serfs had to pay to their landlords, obliging them to surrender 1/10 of their harvest. Visegrad and Buda. During the reign of the Anjou dynasty, Visegrad served as the country's capital. Although Louis the Great had previously hosted the Byzantine emperor in Buda, he preferred to stay at the royal residence in Visegrad when he was not leading military campaigns. It was he who commenced the construction of Buda Palace, which Sigismund later completed. The court would relocate there in the early 1400s, making Buda the country's new center. A favorable location near the Danube crossing, as well as two neighboring cities, Óbuda and Pest, foreign merchants and a thriving craft industry created a highly desirable environment. In 1302, when the Pope imposed an ecclesiastical curse on cities not recognizing King Charles I, Buda's citizens were unintimidated. Showing great fortitude, they held a synod that not only annulled the papal excommunication, but also, to the amazement of the world, pronounced a curse on the Pope himself. Like other cities, Buda's population and leadership at the end of the Árpád era was largely German in origin. Nevertheless, by the 14th century, ever more Hungarians settled in the town, and from the mid-15th century, city council seats were shared equally between Germans and Hungarians. Women in power. Besides the two main Anjou kings, the chronicles also mention two powerful women. The first is Elizabeth of Poland, the daughter of the Polish king. The third wife of King Charles I, she was the mother of his children, including King Louis. Her formidable courage was demonstrated when the royal family, peacefully having breakfast, was attacked by a sword-wielding baron named Felician Zach. She defended her husband and sons with her bare hands, resulting in the loss of 4 fingers. Following her husband's death, she served as regent of Poland and aided her son, King Louis, by representing him in Naples before the German emperor. Another Elizabeth also played an important role in the life of King Louis. Whilst medieval kings chose their wives mostly for political reasons, love occasionally played a role. Louis, who had the power and prestige to select a bride from any of the princesses of Europe, chose to marry for love. His second wife was Elizabeth of Bosnia, the daughter of one of his subjects, the Ban of Bosnia. Although the couple enjoyed a happy marriage, they faced some bitterness as they could not conceive a male heir. Their daughter, Mary, inherited the throne following her father's death. In 1382, Mary became the first to be crowned Queen of Hungary. Initially, however, as Mary was 11 years old, Elizabeth and Palatine Miklós Garai would assume power. Another claimant, Charles Minor of Anjou, arrived from Naples and was elected king by the Diet. However, his reign was cut short after only 55 days, as Elizabeth and Palatine Garai had him assassinated. Despite this setback, Charles's supporters remained steadfast in their plans, having Elizabeth and Mary attacked on their way to the south of the country. The rebels massacred the entourage, threw Palatine Garai's head into the carriage, and captured the women. They later strangled Elizabeth, whilst Mary was released a year later by her husband, Sigismund of Luxembourg. King Sigismund. Sigismund of Luxembourg, the Holy Roman Emperor's son, was chosen by Louis the Great for his daughter Mary. The child Sigismund was betrothed to Mary and brought up at the Hungarian royal court, so as to learn the country's language and customs. Following the death of Louis, Sigismund had to compete for the hand of Mary, and thus also the Hungarian crown. He was finally crowned King of Hungary in 1387 and ruled for over 50 years, initially together with Mary, until the young queen's life was taken in a fatal hunting accident. In 1401, royal council members imprisoned Sigismund, but with skillful diplomacy, he took control of the situation. Making large donations of land, he was able to consolidate his power. His international career began later, first as King of Germany and then, from 1419, of Bohemia. In 1433, he was crowned Holy Roman Emperor in Rome by the Pope. From 1411, he was undoubtedly the most powerful monarch in Europe. His most notable achievement was in 1414, organizing the Council of Constance to unite the Catholic Church, which had for decades been divided by a struggle between popes and anti-popes. He was also an educated monarch who spoke 8 languages, including Latin, Hungarian, German, Czech, Italian, and French. He read widely and was able to address the synod on complex dogmatic issues. Although European politics repeatedly required his presence abroad for extended periods, he cared deeply about Hungary. Even as emperor, his seat remained in the royal palace of Buda. In his will, he left instructions to be buried in Nagyvárad, next to his great predecessor King Ladislaus. This is highly indicative of his attachment to Hungary. A thriving culture. Under the Anjou kings and Sigismund, culture thrived within Hungary. Iconic buildings were built, the Gothic churches of Kassa, Kolozsvár, and Brassó, and the palaces of Visegrád, Buda, and the castle of Diósgyőr. The abundance of precious metals enabled goldsmiths to craft exquisite jewels and religious artifacts. In 1373, the workshop of Hungarian sculptors Márton and György Kolozsvári cast the first bronze equestrian statue in medieval Europe, which depicted St. George on horseback. One of the most valuable pieces of codex art is the Hungarian Anjou Legendary, an illuminated manuscript which depicts in pictures the lives of 59 saints. King Louis established a university in Pécs, and King Sigismund founded one in Óbuda, though neither survived for long. Most of the cultural artifacts from the Anjou and Sigismund periods were scattered or destroyed during the Turkish occupation and the wars of the 16th and 17th centuries. Only the ruins around the royal palaces have remained. The famous royal statues of the Kolozsvári brothers were also destroyed, and most of the gold and silverware disappeared over the centuries or ended up far away from Hungary. For instance, Queen Elizabeth's gilded household altar has become a precious item in the permanent collection of New York's Metropolitan Museum. And, A few pages of the Hungarian Anjou legendary have been preserved in Paris, the Vatican, Washington, D.C., and St. Petersburg. It is very fortunate that at least some artifacts have survived, as they serve as a reminder of an era when Hungary, under the rule of the Anjou monarchs and King Sigismund, stood for nearly 2 centuries as one of the most important economic and cultural powers in Europe.